Welcome to Licensed Poetics, a podcast where aspiring writers talk about books. I'm your host, Fang Ling.
And I'm Derek Dow.
Woohoo! Welcome to a new episode. And who do we have here, Derek? A very special guest.
Yes, just want to introduce my ex-landlord, Jeremy, who's joined us on the podcast today.
I like how out of all the things that he is to you, you use ex-landlord.
People are going to think that he's my boyfriend. That is like, people are going to be like, oh, that's cute. They're like kidding.
Long distance is hard.
Well,
yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, long distance is really difficult.
Yeah, well, Jeremy is your best friend.
Yeah, it sounds weird to say it like that, but yeah, I guess so. That's so lame to be like, oh, he's
such a hard launch.
That's a hard launch.
It's like it's a step above like Facebook status to like I'm announcing
there are
that I run.
There are friends out there who are just like finding out the hard way that I'm taken, and it's going to be a real struggle for them, but it is what it is.
Yes, so today's episode is a book club episode, and the book is actually a recommendation from Jeremy.
Yes.
I mean, we'll get into that a bit. We'll get into that a bit later, but yes. So just to give Chad some context, in this episode, we'll be talking about The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. I almost forgot the title of the book just now.
It's so forgettable, right? This is one of those names.
And I think it's going to be a slightly different episode compared to our past book club episodes. But nevertheless, you will hear about the context, why we chose to read this book, our thoughts on it, whether we recommend it to anyone, and also you'll hear us react.
Usually you would say who we would recommend this to. But you went straight for whether we would ever recommend, even think or dream of recommending this to anyone.
That is what I said. Yes, that is correct. And also, we will be reacting to some unhinged reviews on Goodreads. So stay tuned. I think it's going to be a really exciting episode. And as usual, we'll split it into the spoiler-free section and the spoiler section. Although to me, that's not really applicable because I am physically incapable of giving spoilers in this book.
And I'm only a little bit more capable of giving spoilers. So all spoilers almost will be delivered by Jeremy.
By Jeremy, yes. Okay, cool.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. Did you guys finish the book?
That's a great point to bring up. So I think that's the first question.
Am I single-handedly defending a like quarter-read book?
Quarter? That's generous.
Oh my god, no.
So the first big question.
I read a quarter of it. So.
You read a quarter. Well done, Derek. I read 16%.
Oh my gosh.
And I know some members of the chat are going to be thinking, how do you think you're qualified to do a book club episode if you've only read 16%? Well, maybe I'm not.
One of your guests might think so as well. Yeah, blaze ahead.
Like, I'm just going to say, like, I'm going to preface all of the insight and all of the thoughts that I have on this book with a huge, I only read 16%. I might change my mind if I finish the rest of the book, but I am not going to read the rest of the book. I feel really bad, Jeremy. I'm really sorry.
No, all good. I'm ready to strongly defend Ken Liu and one of my favorite books. So against the 16% read.
It's one of your favorite books. Oh my god. Okay, now I really feel like I really need to spend some time in the corner of shame.
No. Well, apparently I should. I'm at number tier. So
it was better than I expected.
Seriously, I think my expectations were too high.
I read the first book, so.
Did you read it or did you attempt to read it?
I attempted to read it. I read how much I think I read about maybe the same percentage into it.
A quarter.
Maybe less.
Oh my god. So before we start talking about The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu, which is a fantasy book, a massive fantasy book. It's like 800 pages or more, I believe. Something that Jeremy requested that we talk about. You might not remember. This is a while ago. You said you listened to one of LP's old episodes, and you said you cannot believe that I prefer The Hobbit over Lord of the Rings.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, what is that?
It's fantasy, you know?
What is that?
And I think it's a super good thing to talk about because it's about like what people read fantasy literature for or like fantasy films. The Hobbit is my comfort series. I love The Lord of the Rings too. And I know that they're much better films compared to The Hobbit. But for some reason, The Hobbit has become my comfort. And like I go to it when I'm like, I just want something mind-numbing for a while that's gonna like take me away from real life, but don't take me to a place where I have to think too hard.
I wouldn't suggest that the Lord of the Rings trilogy requires a lot of thought either, and I'm a huge fan of it. But I actually I don't think it's like heavy watching or like necessarily deep. So that's why that sort of distinction between the two series kind of confuses me.
That's a valid question. Maybe it's just the sheer fact that I've seen The Hobbit way more times than The Lord of the Rings. So it's not that The Lord of the Rings requires more thinking. It's The Hobbit requires even less thinking.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Okay.
I kind of get that. I've done that with like, not specifically The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, but I've definitely like I have my favorite TV shows and then I have the ones that I watch all the time. I don't like The Big Bang Theory, but I have watched it from beginning to end, and it's a lot of seasons. It's like 18 seasons or something. And I've watched it beginning to end like about 10 times or something.
Yeah, like when Derek was living, just in the kitchen, it's playing in the background like all the time. Yeah, like
Oh,
Sheldon, why?
this is cute, like roommate landlord lore. How long did we give ourselves to read this book?
Was it like 3 weeks? 2 weeks? I can't remember. I think maybe.
I think it was 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, then actually it's quite long.
Exactly. I was gonna say, because we're not exactly like unfamiliar to reading. I remember for one of our previous book club episodes for Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. I mean, even though that was a much, much shorter book, a novella really, we only gave ourselves like 1 day or 1 weekend to read it. And this book, it's 800 pages, but I think 3 weeks was plenty of time for me to read an 800-page book if I really wanted to read it.
You gave yourselves 3 weeks to read this one. It took me 3 months or so to finish this same book. So I was like, oh, wow, that's ambitious. Yeah.
Yeah, because we started reading this book way after Jeremy had already finished it. Like it's not like all three of us were reading it at the same time.
Yeah. And Jeremy, you finished this book multiple times, right?
How many times have you read this book, Jeremy?
3 times.
I really feel like I should
Derek's
go to
shaking
the
his
corner
head.
of shame now.
No, what? Why?
Because you loved it
Just
so
means
much.
you think the book is you just think the book is stupid. So like I think
Yeah, it's not
fine.
a genre or style, or it's not for everybody, of course. Yeah, I'm keen to hear what you actually think of it, though. That's
Next up, we need to do something that we always do in our book club episodes, which is summarize how you feel about this book in 5 words or less. And the purpose of this is to set the tone of the book club discussion. Although I feel like from what we've already said, the tone is kind of pretty clear already. But let's do the 5-word exercise anyway, just for fun.
I feel like Jeremy should go first.
Okay, let's see. It's I don't know. I could probably only give like adjectives. I think it's really epic. I think it's heartfelt. I think it's historically engaging.
That's 4 words already.
Those are 4 words, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll leave it there.
That's good. So epic, heartfelt, and historically engaging. Interesting. What about you, Derek?
I, I can go next unless you've got a very snide one, and then I think you should go first.
I was gonna do a very snide one, but after being in my corner of shame, I'm gonna do a more sincere one.
Okay.
You go first.
All right. If you liked Airbender.
Airbender, as in Avatar: The Last Airbender. I haven't seen it.
Oh, so yeah, I feel like we'll get into it. So mine probably needs a bit more explanation, but I think Jeremy kind of knows where I'm going with it.
Yeah,
But
I do.
yeah, we can talk about the themes and all that later. But yeah, basically, if you liked Airbender, I think you'd like it.
Yeah, okay. I think my 5 words. It was gonna be bad. What the F, Jeremy? But then I'm like Jeremy loves this book so much. I don't want to be that mean. So I'll just say like,
no, that's
bad.
fine. No, that's what I'm here for.
He's been used to like having his passions shit all over for a long time. I think.
You mean by you?
All the time, honestly. It won't stop me ever.
Entire shows rendered unwatchable.
If I had to swap out my like really mean 5 words, it would be like I am very disappointed because I thought I was gonna love it. I really tried to love it, but I didn't. So it's a pretty big disappointment, actually.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we will get into explaining all of that, but I think we should give a synopsis of the book just for any listeners who have not read it and they don't know what we're talking about.
So it reads the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty, the epic fantasy trilogy by Ken Liu. Dara is united under the Emperor Ragan, once known as Kunigaru, the Bandit King. There's been peace for 6 years, but the Dandelion throne rests on bloody foundations. Kuni's betrayal of his friend Matazindu, the hegemon. Actually, no, don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce any
the
of it.
hegemon's rule. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a note on pronunciation too. The hegemon's rule was brutal and unbending, but he died well, creating a legend that haunts the new emperor no matter what good he strives to do. Where war once forged unbreakable bonds between Kuni's inner circle, peace now gnaws at their loyalties. Where ancient wisdoms once held sway, a brilliant scholar promises a philosophical revolution. And from the far north, over the horizon, comes a terrible new threat. The scent of blood is in the water.
You were gonna say something, Derek.
No, I didn't really have anything. I was just like, what a stupid name.
To which one? All of them?
All of them, but like Kunigaru just makes me mad for some reason.
Yeah. Look, I think the elephant in that blurb is all of the fantasy names, right? Emperor Ragan, Kunigaru, Dara, as in the name of the land, and hegemon. Yeah, so you can tell from that blurb, right? It's a fantasy where there's a lot of invented reality, invented language, invented vocabulary, I think. And that's actually one of the big things, the big reasons I couldn't get into this book. Because those words, they don't make etymological sense to me. I don't know if either of you felt the same way. It's like, well, I only have, in terms of fantasy, I only have really The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter to compare to, right? But in those 2 books, when the author creates a word, they're never like just throwing random syllables together. They're actually sourcing the word from like Old English or like Old Norse mythology or whatever. Like, for example, in The Hobbit, all of the dwarves' names are taken directly from Old Norse mythology, where the names of the dwarves, like Thorin, Dwalin, Kili, Fili, like, because Old Norse mythology has that connection with modern day English, those words have that like old timey feel, but they still like roll off your tongue and is easy to say and like makes sense. Whereas I feel like with Ken Liu's invented vocabulary, it's just like random syllables being thrown together.
I was gonna go off that and say that, to be fair to this book, this is the sequel. The first book is Grace of Kings, right? And so this is a sequel, but having said that, I also started reading Grace of Kings and I had the exact same problem because the names are weird and alien and like, not even alien, they also just sound really lame. I was like,
yeah,
every name is cringy.
exactly. And
Yeah,
I was
so
trying to find
interesting. Right.
a reason behind that cringiness. I'm like, it's not unusual for fantasy literature to have like weird words. Then how come some words are more grating on the ear, and some words
Yeah,
are just
yeah.
like more comfortable to read? What do you think
Yeah,
of that,
I mean,
Jeremy?
like you can't really beat Tolkien in terms of, I mean, I don't like, he's like an expert linguist and like an
Linguist.
expert in like, yeah, in so many areas of like Norse mythology and Old English and all that literature. I don't know if I can't really think of any example. I think what I'm interested in is like I can't think of any example that's of fantasy where I found the names to be really interesting and it not being sort of Eurocentric or based in like Scandinavian or probably mixing up all bunches of cultures there. But that part of the world, a Eurocentric view of what a good fantasy name is. Having said that, I guess I kind of tuned out the names in this one. It wasn't a huge obstacle for me.
And that's very fair though, to just tune it out. I mean, you know how when people read like a fantasy name, they usually just go in their head and just like almost like capture the name like symbolically in their mind, and then like they don't even like really try to pronounce it. Okay. And the Eurocentrism thing is a really great point to bring up, I think, because do you guys know that Ken Liu describes his own genre as silk punk?
I think, yeah, so he describes it as silk punk, but I've seen interviews subsequent to like, I guess all the marketing where he really regrets coming up with that term or using it in the way that he did because I think a lot of other people interpreted other works as silk punk. It didn't align with his definition, or it was also part of like a way to try and draw readers in, in terms of like book marketing. But that phrase doesn't really, it doesn't really carry through the books themselves. It's just, I think, like a layer of marketing that comes over it. I'm sure there's some interviews where he says
silk punk is the same way steampunk or like cyberpunk. It's just like an alternate edgy reality that includes whatever the prefix is. So
he's got a blog post on this.
This is why we got Jeremy. This is why Jeremy's on this episode.
Nice. But you said he regrets using it. So
since I invented that term, I guess I should define it. No, it's not Asian flavored steampunk. No, it's not Asian influenced fantasy. No, it's not da da da. It's a very specific technology and literary aesthetic. Let me explain. As I wrote this Dandelion Dynasty, a grand tale of both technology and magic, melding past reinterpretation with future hope crafting, drawing on literary traditions from around the world, I struggled to explain the book to people. Silk punk was the shorthand I came up with to describe the technology aesthetic I wanted for the Dandelion Dynasty series, as well as the literary approach I used in composing the books. I have more questions now, actually. He was influenced by the ideas of W. Brian Arthur. I could go on, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now I'm worried that chat is going to call me racist and be like, oh, I only like the foreign words when it's Eurocentric. But no, I did have this inkling where he was trying to create these words from languages around the world. Because some of the words are obviously Chinese, like the names like Jia, J-I-A, and Luan, L-U-A-N. And then some other words are clearly not Chinese. And so I think maybe what he was trying to do is do like a mix of Asian Pacific culture, right? And I think there is a way to do that while still being etymologically consistent. Like Tolkien, I'm just comparing him to Tolkien because that's the only thing I've read. Like he took inspiration from like lots of different real world languages to create his fictional languages and still made it like etymologically made sense. So like I definitely appreciate what Ken Liu was trying to do, but it's just I don't think it worked well. Oops.
I'm trying to think of other books where they have like really clear etymological parallels that are like Asian based. So for example, like I think the Poppy War series, the that series by R.F. Kuang has a bit more of a very, I think the parallels between names and countries are a lot more obvious. So that when you read it, you're like, oh, okay, these people are Japanese, these people are Chinese, and then the historical things play out, and you're like,
I think that's kind of the point, right? You have to make it alien enough so that the entire world is different. Because the one thing I do credit I credit him with here, I think, is that a lot of Asian inspired stuff just gets lazy and it just sticks like different names on the countries and it gives them slightly different politics, but it's the same shit. And it's just usually an Asian person's way of like retelling a historical thing without trying to make anything new. And like in this way, he's really trying to make it a separate fantasy work, which is like, I mean, that's commendable. The names are still uncool and deeply embarrassing, but like, that being said, I think it serves the function, right? That's what he's trying to do.
I see what you mean. I can see what you mean. And I have not read the Poppy War series by R.F. Kuang. And if I ever come across a fantasy book where they're just slapping different names on Asian countries, I would not be able to stomach that.
Yeah, it's not enjoyable. It's like, well, in that circumstance, it's like, okay, well, why don't I just read some of the great nonfiction books about this chapter in history and just read that rather than, mix it up with like battle school tropes and,
Yeah. To be fair, even when Tolkien's world has any connection with like real life geography, that really irks me too. Like the fact that his villains' languages are like his lesser being, quote unquote, languages are based on Hebrew and Arabic, and that like the high elves languages are based on Latin. Like, I hate that too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. There's a lot of racism threaded throughout the Lord of the Rings books, in spite of how much I'm a huge fan of them and how I think the spirit of Tolkien is one that tried to promote like, I don't know, equality in some sense. But yeah.
Fantasy is such a like contentious genre. I didn't realize.
It is.
Fantasy is a really racist genre.
Yeah.
It's really tied in the aesthetics of purity.
That's so interesting.
True. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
But
wait, so Jeremy, would you say fantasy is your favorite genre, or do you have like a different favorite genre?
Yeah, it'd be my favorite genre. Yeah, I really enjoy fantasy.
You know what? The best way to test, I think, like, I don't know if it's just like a very like boy coded thing, but you just ask someone how they want to die, you will find out what their favorite genre is. I strongly believe that.
Derek keeps talking about this. And it's, you know what? I believe you. Maybe it's a boy-coded thing because that's the only reason I can see to explain this interesting fashion.
Jeremy and I used to talk, we would talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
We like send memes back and forth about it.
If you ask that question to Ken Liu, he'll be like, my way to die is to die as the emperor of like an impending army invades my kingdom or something, right?
I don't think Ken Liu is cool like that, to be honest.
I don't think so.
Oh, you think that's cool? You think that's cool? I think that's lame as shit.
That's way cool. That's heaps cool. That's heaps cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think Ken Liu partakes in this sort of thing. He's too busy preaching and teaching people things.
Ouch. Oh my God.
I got a whole thing about this, so we're going to get into it. But like,
we'll get into it. Okay. Is there anything we'd like to say about silk punk or fantasy genre, or about the blurb?
I feel like we didn't even talk about like I know we summarized the plot, but we didn't really talk about it at all. Would you say that's an accurate like summary of the plot? Because again, I only read like a quarter of it.
Good question.
I don't know what happens after the quarter.
Is it a good blurb? Like, we don't want to like summarize the plot, right? Like, this is the spoiler-free section. It's just the setup. Yeah. Summarize the setup. Yeah.
I think that blurb is it's like the opening credits of a Star Wars. Like those title cards where the yellow text scrolls up and it sort of says the background, and then you forget it the moment it passes. I think it's a pretty pointless blurb in that like everything that's I think important about the story kind of takes off from where it starts in Wall of Storms, and that was kind of just a summary of what happened in Grace of Kings.
maybe you can give the setup in terms of the characters. Like, there is Emperor Ragen, who also known as Kunigaru. Like, who are the people around him?
Yeah, so Kunigaru is the emperor of this archipelago type kingdom called Dara. And it is, a lot of it's very Asian inspired. I would also say kind of Greek mythology inspired as well. Like this sort of kingdom. And the story revolves around, whereas the first book revolves around the story of him and how that kingdom was united. This book tells a story of his children. And so we open on a scene with several of his kids mucking about at a pub. It's a fantasy book that opens in a pub or a bar scene. And also a scholar that appears inside one of the pubs in the same pub. And the story takes off from there and tracks their arcs and journeys from there.
Which is literally the Aragorn like scene, right? Like that's the
It is.
the
Yeah.
Aragorn.
Yeah.
It's the classic.
Fantasy loves a pub scene.
Yeah, we should talk about the author. There's one really important part about the author. So the author's bio is Ken Liu is an award-winning American author of science fiction and fantasy. He's best known for his epic fantasy series, The Dandelion Dynasty, which our book is book 2 of, and his acclaimed short story collections, including The Paper Menagerie and other stories. Liu has won numerous awards, including the Hugo, Nebula, and World Fantasy Awards, for both his original fiction and his translations of Chinese science fiction, notably Liu Cixin's The Three-Body Problem. Yeah, so that last bit is really important because I really like The Three-Body Problem, and Ken Liu is the translator of that, and his English translation made it really popular in the English-speaking world.
Maybe it's the original writer's writing style that makes the translation easy, but I don't think that's the case because I've read Three Body Problem. I'm sure like the chat would know about it. Very famous book, very famous series. Actually, Jeremy put me onto it because I didn't know about it at all. Yeah, I was like, books are dumb. Yeah. And then you introduced me to The Three Body Problem, which is a great book. And then I read The Dark Forest, and then I also read what was it, Death's End or whatever it's called. Yeah. And the first and the third are both translated by Ken Liu, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the second one is translated by some knob. I don't know who it is.
Joel Martinson. Oh wait,
and
your name's the knob. Okay, oops.
You can tell the difference.
Yeah, well, yeah. You immediately, like, I don't know if like Jeremy feels this way, but I immediately, like, I read it and I was like, I kind of got dragged into the story because it was a bit of a power fantasy, and I was like, okay, I can kind of enjoy this. And then it just got more sexist and more stupid, and then the writing, it became obvious that like there was something in the translation work that he was doing that just like he wasn't doing whatever Ken Liu was doing, and so it read much worse to me. Yeah, I honestly, it's the one time where I'm like, oh, I can tell the difference in the translation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Because I wouldn't have thought that until I read the third book, and then I was like, oh, it's back to normal. Like it sounds good again.
Wow.
There's something about it. I don't know.
That's so interesting. I don't know that because I've only read the Chinese edition, the original, obviously.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, so you would have read it with the first book structure being different from the English translation then?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have. But yeah, I've heard he's a great translator. And that's actually a huge part of the reason why I agreed to picking this book for book club, really. Because I had high expectations. But I guess that was silly of me because for his translation work, he's obviously just like relaying the original author's ideas. So I guess I expected The Wall of Storms to be as good as The Three-Body Problem.
I can see difficulties
so
with that.
Yeah.
You know, that's how they bait you, because it's like that classic thing where the movie equivalent, right, is like you see, all you see is the name, like, I don't know, Spielberg, and you're like, wow, but it's just produced by him, and the director is some nobody who sucks. like Michael Bay.
Well, the Transformers movies are all produced by Steven Spielberg. Well, I think they were all produced by Steven Spielberg. So, yeah. So
Did you read The Three Body Problem first? Or?
Yeah, I read The Three Body Problem first, and I really enjoyed it. I had the same criticism with Dark Forest as Derek. It just didn't read as well, and I think that's kind of a common complaint, I think, with readers of the English translations. So yeah, I think Ken Liu did a pretty good job. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do admire him for like all the work he's done trying to translate like modern Chinese writers into English. I really do admire that. So even though I'm going a little hard on him in this episode and he happens to listen to it, I'm sorry, let's be friends. I want to be friends with him.
I think he might be receptive to that, to be honest. Well, until this episode comes out. So then it's probably like you got no hope. But for a long time, I was convinced that Ken Liu wasn't real and that Jeremy was writing these books under Ken Liu's name, and he was just trying to like sell them to me. But
is this where you say Jeremy decided. Looks like Ken Liu?
Different.
I think at the time that Jeremy had a really bad haircut. Jeremy had like a bad haircut one time, and I just remember thinking like, "Oh, that's Ken Liu." And now I look like Ken Liu. So you know
exactly.
What I mean?
I was like, "Is this a Ken Liu lookalike contest right here?"
Oh my god, it's so good. Do a Ken Liu
You actually do. I can't unsee it now.
I wasn't gonna go there, like with the new haircut. I wasn't gonna address the elephant in the room. Okay, the next question that I have is, what did you expect before you start reading the book, and did the book match your expectations?
I read this one. So the first book I read, I picked it up in a bookstore like ages ago. First time I was traveling alone, and so I was reading it while traveling around Edinburgh, first time alone, and it was great. I thought it was good, but I really struggled with the pacing. I thought it was like the female characters were really boring. That there wasn't a lot of agency in them, so it was kind of hard to find interesting or reflect, the contemporary world now. Despite all that, I thought, look, I'll give the next book a shot, in spite of those problems, and it frustrated me. This book frustrated me a lot as well to start, but then I think you sit with it, and then the story builds, and all the context and all the philosophy and everything kind of crescendos, and you're like, oh wow, this is really, really like something quite masterful. So, yeah,
that's a great point. I think the reward kind of comes definitely later on in the book.
You think you wouldn't know, but like you think you would.
I wouldn't know. Absolutely. I wouldn't know. That is really interesting because I think I'm very used to a certain type of reading where I almost expect extreme reward or insight or satisfaction to me from the very first page.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And the Three Body Problem had that. And I don't know, my expectation for this book was like my expectation for the Three Body Problem.
Yeah.
Which is a very silly.
She was like Chinese, so like
But I wonder if that's also like because the Three Body Problem is like a thriller. That first book is kind of like a thriller with like suspense and conspiracy, and you kind of drawn into it from the start, right? So many like one of the biggest problems I find with the fantasy genre is having to just go through the first third of the book and be like, oh, these are the rules, this is the world, this is the context. And if you don't like those things, you'll switch off really quickly. That's just the nature of the genre. But you kind of have to go through this like song and dance of, getting through that before you like see the payoff. And in that sense, it's a genre that really demands your patience for the reward.
That's perfect way to advocate for a boring genre. That was brilliant. That was masterful, frankly.
I was literally going to say that I think patience is important. Although I do think there is a way to do interesting world building. Or maybe the current state of the genre just doesn't demand it. So that if you are an author out there who's writing fantasy and you can achieve exciting world building, I think that will make you really stand out, really.
That's a pretty incentivist philosophy. I don't know if I vibe with that.
Well, screw you. What's wrong with
Did
wanting
you get
to
the part
write
about the
engaging world building?
incentiveness?
You okay? So no, I was making a joke. You know, you didn't get that far into the book. I made a joke based on the book, but I should have known you didn't get there.
I do not get that. I stopped reading
Yeah,
once.
yeah.
It was like they eat with 3 chopsticks. I'm like,
Oh,
that's a perfect
man.
segue into the next question. So the next question to guide our book club discussion, I'm very proud of this question, by the way, is let's fill in the blank. I think this book is very XYZ. And the top 3 most XYZ things are. So you have to swap out XYZ for like
Oh, okay. That is a good question.
adjective,
That's actually pretty fun.
right? An adjective or like anything. So let's all say what our XYZ would be. So for example, my would be, I think this book is very annoying. And the top 3 most annoying things are, I'm going to give 3 things.
Oh my god, this is going in so many different directions. Wow.
Exactly. So Chad,
That's
if
great.
any of you are hosting your own book club at home, maybe try and use this to guide your discussion next time. Yes, I'm glad you like my idea, co-host. Let's make this a regular thing.
Yeah, we should. I think it is good. I was like,
That's
co-host.
awesome. Yeah.
You said that like an insult. Jeez.
I think it's because you're like,
like
oh, I think
co-host.
it's actually a great idea. Or just like throwing insults at each other. I mean, I think that's a pretty aspiring writer thing to do, to be honest. And also, out of the 3 people in the room right now, I don't think Jeremy is an aspiring writer. But he is clearly the nicest, gentle soul. And we are the assholes.
No. Definitely not.
I think since I've moved out, Jeremy has found out that he's not as nice as he was allowed to be when I was around.
Yeah, because I think when you have somebody who's around who says a lot of things that you just subconsciously absorb, when somebody doesn't say those things, you turn to this like person that's no longer there, and you imagine what they would say, and then you just oh, no one's saying it, and then you're like, oh, do I say it? And then if I do say it, it's just it doesn't.
And then you
work
like
quite as well.
supplement like what Derek would have said, right? And you just say,
yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh no, this is bad. I needed Derek around to take the heat from my.
Yeah, because I feel like Derek and myself, we're just always like the critic, the hater in the room, like the overly critical for no reason person. Like we can't just be happy for things.
You know what? I was thinking about this recently. I found out that people think that's my catchphrase because I've been saying that a lot. I didn't know I said it a lot. Apparently, I say it all the time. I didn't know that.
What catchphrase?
I was thinking about it recently. Yeah.
But basically, I'd been thinking about how I don't feel like I'm the critic. I feel like skeptic is more accurate a description.
Skeptic, yeah. Oh, I think I am.
Like someone will be like, "Oh, this book is great." I'll be like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I understand you. Derek. Like, on the one hand, of course, you want to be a good friend, but at the same time, you got to be honest about what you think, And then we are just like constantly thinking and like trying to pick apart things, and we can't just let people have. Well, which is why I'm happy for myself that I found that I have The Hobbit. Like, there's at least there's one thing in my life that I don't
That's awesome.
attempt to try to pick it apart. By the way, this is a good place to plug my Buy Me a Coffee. So if you subscribe to my Buy Me a Coffee, you'll already know about this because I wrote about it in one of my poetry review posts last year. So if you like to support Licensed Poetics, please head to buymeacoffee.com/licensedpoetics. Okay, cool. Let's get into the XYZ question. I can go first since I'm debuting this question for the first time. So I already said my word would be annoying. Ken Liu, if you're listening, I really do want to be friends with you. So I think this book is annoying. And the top 3 most annoying things are, first one, I've already mentioned this, but the jarring etymology of the fantasy words. For some reason, I wasn't able to block it out. And a really amazing example is Kong Fiji. So in this fantasy world, right, there are these sages, much like in China, there's Confucius and Mencius, and how the emperor's children are all required to memorize these sayings by the sages, like for their ancient wisdom. And Confucius in China, he's known as Kong Fuzi. And when Ken Liu created a sage in his fantasy world, he named him Kong Fiji. It just, it detached me from the fantasy world so fast that I'm like, what the hell is happening? And another thing is, you know how in this world, when they pay money, that their currency is like silver pieces? They're like, oh, I paid 3 pieces of silver for like a beer or something. And I'm like, why don't you use silver tael? Like, do you guys know the word tael? Taels? So that is a real historical word used in China, I think. And I'm like, I think that's a really beautiful word, and it's like has that real historical context. I'm like, why didn't you just use that word? Okay, I think I'm just being nitpicky by now. Okay, so that was my first annoying thing. Should I keep going or should you guys go?
No, keep going. Just do them all.
It makes sense.
I feel like because it's the same concept. Yeah,
okay.
They're all annoying.
Okay. So that's the first annoying thing, the wonky etymology. The second thing is the eating sticks. The part where it made me actually stop reading at 16% is where in this fantasy world, they eat with eating sticks. And I have this exact sentence written out here because I do want to complain about it. It's like, they're like, I think they're teaching their children table manners or something. They're like, oh, we use 1 stick for dumplings and pot stickers, 2 sticks for noodles and rice, 3 for fish and fruit and meat, so that one could use 2 of them in one hand to hold the food while dividing into smaller pieces with the other one. And I'm like, is this meant to be like a combination of chopsticks and fork and knives? And I'm like, why can't they just use chopsticks in the fantasy world? In The Hobbit, they used fork and knives. They didn't use some like special dwarven cutlery to eat with.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'm just wondering, where does the word chopsticks come from? Where does that phrase come from, though?
Oh, you mean the English word chopsticks?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I have no idea.
So when I read eating sticks, I'm like, oh, eating sticks. Wait, where does chopsticks come from? And that's kind of where I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is just, it's a different world.
Oh, that's true. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so that's what, when I read that, I was like, oh.
Because the word chopstick, whenever we say chopstick, we think about it as like one word, chopstick.
Yeah.
But it is actually 2 words. Ken Liu's smarter than us. We're idiots.
He's actually is smarter than us. We are idiots.
He would be. He's like, what is he? He's a lawyer. He's an engineer. Isn't he like a bunch of stuff?
He's like a Harvard engineer, a Harvard lawyer or something, right?
He's like a genius. He's like an actual genius.
Yeah, don't mind us.
And we're critiquing, and we're just critiquing his work.
Yeah, we're jealous idiots. Like, we'll never make it as big as him. Like, let's be honest. So, but I want to be friends with you. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, the third annoying thing is kind of ties back to the first one, which is the constant quoting of little metaphors from the sages. Like, it's what Derek said earlier about the cute little Asian metaphors. And I think that's I don't know, Chinese people, sometimes they do that. But I think when they do it, it's because that metaphor has already become like an idiom sort of thing in the Chinese language. So it makes a bit more sense to say. And then an example I have for one little metaphor is, don't worry, daughter. You know, an oyster clasped in the branches of the most exquisite head of coral is as likely to hold a pearl as the one lying in mud. Basically, it's supposed to mean that like wherever
I have a
the
list of
oyster
these.
comes, nice. Wherever the oyster comes from is as likely to hold a pearl. Like, genius can come from anywhere. That's what it's supposed to mean. But like, it's in English. The book is in English, and it's so long and elaborate. It's like 2 lines, and like by the time you get to the end, the beautiful metaphoric resonance is already like expired. And it's not like it's an existing saying in English, like like, I don't know, the example I came up was like sharpest tool in the shed. I'm like, that is a fun idiom to say because it has the sh sounds, right? But yeah, I don't like how if he wanted to use an oyster metaphor, he gotta come up with a better way of saying it in English, and it's just really annoying. Anyway, Derek, what were you gonna say?
Maybe I'll just piggyback off your thing. Is the metaphors, like the Asian metaphors, that make me like physically ill. But there are lots of stupid ones. Like the reason a metaphor works is because it's inherently beautiful. And therefore it becomes an idiom lasting over time.
Yeah, right.
But all of these are so fundamentally ugly that I can't suspend my disbelief anymore. It was useless to think about how she and her mother could also lead a life of ease and luxury, to be dressed in silk instead of rough hemp, to eat soft white rice instead of the sandy millet that scratched their teeth, as it was for a dandelion to think that it could be honored like the chrysanthemum. Shut up! I don't care. This is stupid. It's not a pretty thing like you think it is.
It kind of.
I think I know. I really understand your feeling, but I also find it really difficult to explain why I feel that way.
Yeah. Like, is it just an aesthetic thing? Because when I hear those metaphors, I'm like, oh, this is not that different from what I would have read when I read like Romance of the Three Kingdoms or Journey to the West, where people just wax lyrically about like, yeah. So it's kind of like, or even like
I'm such an asshole.
Translations. What do you mean?
I think there's something to do with like Ken Liu is trying to go for that Asian style of writing where maybe this more kind of delicate, sensitive style of metaphor is more accepted in like the Chinese language, whereas if you translate it into English, I think it's a language difference thing. I think it's a language difference thing. Whereas, with the dandelion thing, as if when you're saying it in Chinese, you're saying it, a metaphor is almost closer to an idiom. No one's actually thinking about a dandelion. People are just actually more savoring the syllable of dandelion if they were to use it.
Right. So it's because it's a fake translation. Okay, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's fair enough.
Because when you read it in English, you have to imagine a dandelion, right? You imagine a dandelion and then a chrysanthemum or whatever. But I don't think in Chinese, when people use that metaphor turned idiom, they're actually imagining that imagery at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then that defeats the whole. But then that doesn't work.
I know, but Jeremy, you were saying that you read those works. Those are like works of classic Chinese literature, and they would contain a lot. Like every sentence is like a metaphor like this, and maybe that kind of primed you to be more used to this kind of writing style then. Because you would have read them in English, right?
Yeah, I read them in English and I was like, wow, it's all very flowery language. People just break out into monologues and speeches about how one should behave. And it's a little annoying, but that's the way the story also used that framework. Yeah.
This is actually so interesting. I think that's what happens when you try to translate things too literally. Which is hilarious because Ken Liu is actually is an amazing translator. But I think that's the difficulty in translating like the classical Chinese literature. Like, I should give a disclaimer that I don't read classical Chinese literature at all. I'm only interested in modern China. And a lot of people are going to hate me for it because like classical China is kind of like held in high esteem. I'm only interested in modern stuff. So
yeah, this is the wrong book.
Maybe I'll try his sci-fi next. I still have hope.
Well, just gonna say that because this book series is a dynasty, and the first book is very like mythic and whatever, and then you start to see more of the Silkpunk in the second. There's a lot of more if modern China or modern Asian cultures are more of your interest. The third and fourth book are really good too. But I just jump over that bridge.
This. He's trying to sell it. He's like Ken Liu's publisher or something. I don't know. Oh, his agent. You're his agent.
I'm not Joe Monty.
This is not just a lookalike contest. This is also like his entire team.
His entire team? Is it his marketing team? Oh, man.
Damn. Okay, let's
Yeah,
move on with the XYZ question. Who's next?
Do you want to go
Get to
Jeremy
your
first?
third.
I feel like.
So what was your
Oh,
third?
the third is
Your-
the third annoying thing is the constant little quoting of little metaphors, basically.
Oh,
what we're
I see.
talking
Yep.
about, yeah.
Yep. Okay, and you reserved one only for just the eating sticks. I love that. Had a special
Yeah.
place.
But I get that. Like I've done that before with like sometimes you run into something. Like I know that like the anime, like like Demon Slayer, people loved it. And I read it and it was tolerable. And then it got to I remember the page it happened. There's a page where the author describes like in like a little text box, narrates a female character and describes her as having soft and supple feminine muscles, and then I put it down. Like I was done after that. I immediately I had the chopsticks reaction. I just put it down. I was like, I'm never reading this again.
Yeah, deal breakers. It's like with dating. Sometimes certain lines just cannot be crossed.
Yeah.
Like I want
you got
chopsticks
the
to be
literary
called chopsticks. The biggest ick. Very icky. All right.
Yeah, Jeremy, you want to go next, or I feel like we can't handle all this negativity at once. So
Yeah. Let's break it up a bit. Oh, okay. I found this book. I think this book is very, very subversive.
Okay.
The top three most subversive things are the treatment in this. I think this could kind of. Oh, okay. I'm just wondering if this is spoilery. No, it's probably fine. The top three most subversive things are the treatment of science and technology as opposed to magic in a fantasy novel. So this book, as you kind of go further into it, deals with a lot of engineering, and there's a lot of thought and care put into the storytelling about how the technology in this world works. That's really, really different to the aesthetic that we're used to with a lot of European technology literature in fantasy novels. So I thought that was really cool.
Wow. Is there like shipbuilding? I'm just guessing.
Yeah. So there's shipbuilding. There's methods of creating electricity that's like completely different to the way we.
oh well, they should have front loaded this stuff.
There's a lot. There's a no. But so that's
Well,
the
I'm
thing,
still
there's
gonna
a
read it,
lot
but
about the
yeah,
world.
yeah.
That's yeah.
Why do they do
yeah,
this?
Oh, okay. Like for examples that actually no, that's spoiler territory. I'll save that for later. But that's
Yeah.
I think the treatment of magic technology is really interesting, and it was one of the things that he was quite transparent about when he talks about the book. Is he wanted a story of where the engineers are heroes rather than magicians or wizards. And I thought that was really cool, like well executed for sure.
Are there still magicians?
Yeah, so I find it's a really interesting treatment of magic in the sense that like we have those like interludes, and you have that early in the book too, where it's like the gods speaking and you hear about the gods.
Oh yeah, like the legend,
Yeah.
mythological stuff almost. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's quite like similar to like the way I recall reading Greek mythology and how you hear the story of the demigods and then it intersected with the stories of the Greek gods like watching over them. And it's really cool because I think it kind of feels like magic, the feeling in fantasy of magic is dying or the gods are dying because people don't believe in us is really, really interesting. And so that was it's like magic is dying, technology is increasing, and I think that's great.
Also, I think not ancient, like old like Chinese stories and myths also do the same thing. Like the Monkey King was hanging out with regular people. It wasn't like, oh, there's like gods up there and then there's like people. Like they would constantly interact with each other. Like I think that's all mythology, right?
Yeah. That's a whole trope. Like the gods are dying, magic is dying, technology is rising, people's faith are being trapped. That is a fantasy trope. The way it's done in this book, especially with the intersection of like the way that like different cultures and colonization comes through and people's beliefs influence one another, I think is quite creative. That is new, I would say, but that's spoiler territory. Yeah.
Okay. What's the next subversive thing?
I think I kind of touched on it just then as well. So I think the treatment of culture is really, really, really good. I don't think I would enjoy a story that based the etymology on one country or one culture in particular. I think the way that Ken Liu created a book that's and it's completely opposite. I know to your thoughts on this, but I think creating a book that felt very different. Like, I actually don't really think of this book very much as Asian. I think of like so many different cultures and historical analogs throughout the world, and seeing those patterns play out, where we don't take the easy route that we would with other fantasy books, where it's like, okay, this country's Japan, this country's China, and they were bad to each other during the war. One may be worse than the other, but white people were also really bad too, and it becomes really like boring. You know, like you just want to read the history books. You want to, like, there's so many great history books out there, and this one here I think is really great. The Wall of Storm is a series because it just doesn't take those easy options with culture. So I really like that.
It's funny because I agree with that. Like I said, if you just like slapped labels on like basically identical world map, I wouldn't have been impressed by that either.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's like the multicultural approach to fantasy writing too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. The one cool thing about that is that, to be fair, multiculturalism in like most modern fantasy is very white, even though it is like, oh, we're multicultural, like we're not white at all. Like, look at there are like Asian people, and there are like, but it's pretty obviously, what do you call it? Like it's so obviously just an aesthetic. And so the same way here, you're like, well, it does feel like a more integrated world, and just the aesthetics of it is Asian. Like, otherwise it's kind of just like any other, like peasants are peasants everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, you can relate to peasants whether you're brown or like, you know what I mean?
But I still think having multiculturalism in fantasy is such a worthwhile thing to pursue, to be honest.
Oh, third thing.
What's the other subversive thing?
Subversive. Top 3 most subversive things. I can't think. What's the third thing? Culture, and then I did.
It's very subversive, but apparently it could only be 2 points long. There are only 2 points of subversion in this.
Those are 2 big points.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, so those are pretty. I think those are pretty significant ones for me. I will. Okay, the one other thing I just thought was really great, and I don't know if this counts as subversive, but I just think that there was a really great teacher-student relationship told throughout the story, and that was just something I hadn't seen before. I wouldn't necessarily call it subversive, but I think that was just different and unfamiliar. Maybe I should have went with this book is very different and unfamiliar instead.
That's fine. Look, I think that's such an interesting point to bring up, the teacher-student relationship, because that is such a huge part of China, of Confucianism, of just like the way parents express love to their kids is through education. And like having a teacher is like paramount in that case.
Yeah. We're all just trying to live lives along with the teachings of Confuci.
Classic moralists. You know what I mean?
What's great about that teacher?
The teacher I'm referencing, it's just there's a real nurturing of curiosity, between that sort of like father teacher type figure and student, and sort of, I just think it's just a really tender relationship. I thought it was really great.
Oh my god!
Yeah, not necessarily the philosophy that they were adopting. Yeah.
I love how you say like father teacher. It's that like mix of like the patriarchy plus the teacher's authority. It drove me nuts.
But the thing for me is that this book is really particular about the way that it delivers messaging, and it is actually super infuriating. It's actually the thing I hate the most about the book. It almost has this assumption that like kids need to be like led and nurtured, but
yeah, right.
What you liked about it, I basically just was like, I reject the premise. Like, this is embarrassing for an adult to think about. Like it just felt like so.
I know.
And until like the other day, so we had this conversation where you were saying like this book is dedicated to his kids, and I was like, oh, he actually is like raising his kids through the book. Like, and when I viewed it that way, I kind of felt I was like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. That makes sense. Like
it makes me feel sorry for his kids.
But like I kind of get it. I think if you were trying to tell your kids a story about this is the world, this is how the world works, I actually think that's quite nice. Me as a reader, I don't give a shit about that. I'm not interested in like, I want to know what your ideas are as an adult to an adult. And I felt constantly spoken down to by this book. And
Spoken down to.
I
exactly.
think,
No,
Unfortunately, I agree.
but it might be subverted.
Yeah. So I want to keep using this as a reason, but it is really early in the book.
So that was the other thing. Like,
Yeah.
but the teacher-student relationship that you mentioned, unless that gets subverted, which it sounds like it does later on.
Yeah. Do you guys remember that scene in the opening where one of the Emperor's 3 kids is trying to basically think of a clever way to lie out of the situation, to not
Oh, yeah.
So
that's right.
cringe.
Yeah.
save himself from punishment, but also not to humiliate his teacher or make his teacher look bad. That's like, and then that kind of behavior is like lauded as good kid behavior in Chinese culture. And that is so toxic. Basically telling a kid to say the right thing in order to protect the adult's feelings.
But this will
And then
all
when
get
the kid does
subverted,
that-
which I get. But you have to catch people earlier. If you were making people like physically ill before they get to the good bit of your book,
Yeah.
well, what are you doing?
My biggest complaint is that it didn't present the scene in a critical angle, but I did leave room. Like, I'm only 16% in. Maybe in the future it'll be subverted. Maybe,
And
I don't know.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it's just like the things like all the things that we hate about the book. And this is as well, like this is where actually it's funny that you mentioned this because I actually called Jeremy and I ranted on the phone about this book before we even had this because I knew that would give me the energy to like continue with the book. At that point, I was even less far in. Maybe that was like less than a week ago. It was like less than a week ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've read so little of this book. I hate it. But then you were mentioning, you were like, you should watch interviews with Ken Liu because it'll kind of tell you what he thinks about writing and story and like all that sort of thing. And I kind of like was like, ugh. I watched it and I was like, oh, actually, I do kind of understand. And I think I was talking about this
What did you just
with Jeremy before because he comes from a world of short stories, right? Like maybe he loves fantasy. I don't know. But it almost felt like he was just using fantasy as a way to get into like talking about the things he wants to talk about. And he also is like not an author that has a clear point of view about stuff. Like he's not really trying to say anything in particular. He just wants to talk about a lot of stuff. And he like, I don't know that he's got really any strong, maybe he does, but he doesn't seem to have a lot of strong opinions on things. He just wants to talk about things and like introduce things and concepts. So like when you're talking about like the love of learning, I think that you mentioned it before, like there's like a love of learning and curiosity. That really is the main thing. Like he just wants to introduce as much cool stuff to you as possible, or in his mind, like interesting or meaningful things as possible.
That's very interesting. And this is a literary question. What makes something interesting? I think you gotta, in your writing, create a reason for animate your cool concept so that a reader can care about it. Like that mythological section of that girl talking to the like flying whales in the sky or whatever. I was like, I don't care.
Yeah. That was pretty boring. I think whenever he starts to rely on like tropes, he's just not good at tropes. Like I feel like he's a very short story writer. A cool idea, cool concept, like knows what he's trying to get at. But like the moment he has to launch into a tropey thing, it's kind of bad, right? I don't know, maybe not bad, but like it's the worst part of his writing, I think. I don't know what Jeremy thinks.
Worst part of his writing.
Yeah, I think that like on your point about, I guess the curiosity part, it does seem like the sort of book that's interested in presenting a lot of ideas, a lot of unfamiliar things that we just don't get a lot in fiction, but not providing an answer on the way things should be. It's just, this is the way this is the way people experience the world and live their lives, experiencing colonization and you know, teacher-student relationships, all those things we've talked about before. And so maybe if the sort of book that you enjoy more is something that holds like a very deep conviction, and the novel from like page 1 to the back is like driven by that single conviction, that'd be like a more enjoyable book for you.
See, Jeremy is such an angel. Like, we're such assholes.
What do you mean? No.
I really think so. But Jeremy, I think you're completely right. I think whenever I read anything, I'm always looking for that very specific angle. It doesn't have to be like a conviction. I think I prefer the word angle over conviction.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. From page 1, I'm looking for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the same would I think I'd have a similar reaction if I was to review some of the other books, which I know you guys enjoy a lot more, like literary, what you would call literary fiction, whatever that means. I just don't enjoy that as much. Like I feel like it's very insular and it's like very single-minded, but it's that exact reason that maybe a massive world with all these disparate references and ideas dropped in is just like too distracting and too unfocused.
But this goes to the thing about like form, right? Because I don't know how, like, because did you also read The Paper Menagerie and like his short stories?
I haven't read that, no.
Because
No.
I feel like it's more of like the point of this novel is different. Like I probably could derive, because he seems like the kind of guy who could very single-mindedly, single idea, like complete a story from beginning to end. And like, it feels like he's like filling in plots. When I was watching an interview where he was like talking about it, we basically confirmed that. He was like, oh, when I went from writing short stories to like full-length novels, books, fiction, I had to learn how to like insert plot, because I, for a long time, had been writing short stories with had a clear purpose, a clear point of view, a clear, as you would say, angle. And then he was like, well, and then I wanted to write something that didn't have that. And he like learned how to plot.
Yeah.
And look, the good thing about not having an angle, quote unquote, is that the book really doesn't judge anything. It's like the world is like this. And
then just accept it. It just accepts it.
No, but he doesn't say that it's good or bad, but that's fine. The world is the way it actually is. That's really useful, I feel like. This is the world. Like, you can love it, you can hate it, you can do whatever, but that's your business. I'm just giving you the information. How do you feel about it?
I also like that voice. I think it can work sometimes. But even that's an angle. That's a bedtime storyteller's angle. It's that like...
I think that's this angle. Also, to be fair, this is the second book in a story. He can assume that he has your attention. Like, he's like, well, you bought the second book. I don't need to do this again.
I like this. This is a very literary, like writerly discussion now. It's about form. And also, like, even if you want to subvert the world, you got to build it first before you subvert it, right? And then what if you lose your reader in the building part of it?
This is kind of what I was getting at with Jeremy as well. We were like, his characters are all like stand-ins for like ideas and stuff, like, and you can like them, but he's not a good character, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's a character writer either. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think,
so like,
yeah.
Have we already gone through your top 3 most XYZ things? Like, what's your word, by the way, Derek?
Oh, like frustrating probably, because like there were a lot of things that I did actually like about, and I probably will finish it, to be fair. It got better as it went on. It definitely, like, after
Where
the
are you up to now,
chopsticks
Derek?
thing.
Just so I can gauge. What's...
On page 200. Ken Liu seems to think that his characters all have the same understanding of the world, and it's very strange. Like, none of the characters have different, like, mental voices. They're the same. It's just Ken Liu in, like, a child's outfit. So, what are you going to say, Jeremy?
I agree. Yeah, the mental voice thing is like kind of uniform across. Characters have different arcs and things happen to them. They react in different ways, but the voice is the same, which is really weird.
And also, like, the way that he manipulates his characters' intelligence levels just to make certain scenes work is a little annoying. Timu sometimes is like smart and sometimes really dumb, but it's not in a consistent character way. Like, sometimes Tim will know information and then sometimes he won't know information about like social graces or etiquettes. Like, if it's something that is necessary for the story to progress, they usually give it to like one of the other kids to be like, hey, isn't that adult doing that thing? And then when it's something like annoying and like morally upright, they get him to say it. But it's the same kind of things that you would know. And it's like, oh, come on, you're doing this character so dirty, bro. This kid. Yeah, it's like if I did a caricature of a goody two-shoes and I wanted to make him as embarrassing and as stupid and as uncool and as lame as possible, I'd be like, oh yeah, being dumb thing. It's so bad.
Yeah.
I just felt sorry for the guy at the end. I was like, oh man. Not at the end, like wherever I got to in the book.
You'll feel more sorry for him later. Spoiler.
Even though you say that, like, generally characters like have different points of view and stuff like that, you can see characters being punished for not stepping, like for having a very particular worldview. And it's kind of mean. Like, the kid's just trying to get by, dude. And the world is so cruel to him for trying to be a good son, and it's so mean.
Is he the oldest son? Like the one that always is good at reciting the classic?
The moralist? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what? This kid doesn't have anything left. they really bag on this kid. Oh man, that's Ken Liu's biggest sin, I think, in this book. Anyway, sorry, I dragged it on too long about.
Yeah, that's rough time.
Poor kid. Okay, I think you've said 3 frustrating things already. So maybe one last question to finally close up the spoiler-free section is: who would you recommend this book to? Do you like people with supreme patience?
I think people who are happy to slog through a fantasy book, because a lot of people I know will slog through a terrible fantasy book and it will end terribly. And this doesn't feel like it's going to do that, to be honest. So if your threshold for like, oh, I don't mind waiting a third of the way in until I get invested or care about the world or the characters, if you're just fine stomaching that, like, there's actually a lot of interesting things that you come across.
I think if you're looking for escapism and a slightly mind-numbing effect where you're just like sitting there and letting it happen to you, if you enjoy that, or if you're looking for that, maybe give it a go.
I don't know if you can be friends with Ken Liu after this.
It's a pretty devastating.
Let's do an objective.
Ken Liu's book.
Is it that bad, really? Like, I mean, there's different books for different things, right?
Yeah, no,
I mean, I don't think Peter Jackson will be happy about what I said about The Hobbit, but still, like, I bought the DVDs and I gave him money. So
yes, yeah. No, The Hobbit's great. I shouldn't hate on it either.
What about you, Jeremy? Who would you recommend it to?
Okay. So I think maybe a person who enjoys reading fantasy, who likes Greek mythology, who likes Chinese soap operas, and has nostalgic relationships with the older members of their family. I actually think that's essential for enjoying this book, because if you watched Last Airbender and you love the Zuko Iroh thing, you'll like this book. It's basically a guarantee. Yeah.
I think that's really a guarantee. I would be genuinely surprised if you didn't. I think.
Go back to the older family member thing.
Yeah.
My dad listens to this. I feel like I shouldn't get into too much.
Oh, hi, Derek's dad. Thank you for listening. Look, we can talk about it in general terms, like, right? Some people have like a more like subversive view of their family, right? Like family is for something to rebel against. For other people, family is like a refuge.
That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's basically like, do you want the mentor? Like, how do you feel about the mentor relationship? I think is a big part of it, because the teaching element of the book is so big that I think if your main way of learning is listening to something and going, I don't know if I kind of don't like that you said that to me, and I feel like I'm gonna learn so that I can tell you you're wrong. You're not really going to enjoy this book that much. But you might enjoy the last 3/4 of the book. You won't enjoy the first quarter of the book.
It's like,
that's the hard bit.
What kind of kid are you? Like, are you the kid that when your parents tell you something, you like thank them for the advice, or you go, that's bullshit, I'm going to go out there and prove you wrong?
Oh, I'm sure you know the answer to that question, knowing Derek.
What, Jeremy, what about you?
Same question. Internalize it, get annoyed, digest it some other way, deal with it later.
Okay, I feel like that's a good in between. So that is who we would recommend this book to. And I think this is a great point to close off the spoiler-free section. Chad, let us know if you enjoyed it. If you're still there, well done.
We haven't even got the spoilers yet. Okay, cool. Yep.
And we're back for the spoiler section. So this section is mostly going to be Jeremy talking for the reason that he's the only one in the book club that has finished the book.
But he's also, to be clear, he's finished it enough for the 3 of us. So really, I feel like there's 3 people's worth of interaction with the book here.
I am so gonna send the link of this episode to Ken Liu himself.
You know, I've been following his Instagram page. He reposts like so many podcasts and so many like reviews, and all of them are glowing. I don't want him to go through the dilemma of being like, I don't know if I should go through, if I should share this one. This is just one guy who's extremely passionate, and everybody else who hates it.
Well, we can sell out and just post the clips of Jeremy saying good things about it. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but you have some personal interactions with Ken Liu. Am I right?
Yeah, way to embarrass me. I saw a post. So I was just really excited about the final books coming out. So I read first and second. What happened with the third and fourth books were they were affected by the COVID publication delays. So they were finished. They were meant to be one single book, and because the book was just way too big, it's split into 2. I decided to read the third and fourth book like as close as possible to when they were the final book would be published, because that's the way that he apparently wanted us to experience like viewing the third and fourth book as one book. So I read them as close together as possible, and I don't know, I think there was a post or something about an author Q&A. I opened a Reddit account, I started asking questions, and yeah, got some great answers too. So that was cool.
That's not embarrassing at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Kind of embarrassing. Fantasy reader. All his friends hate this book. He opens a Reddit account to ask the author questions. Does sound kind of a tad uncool to me. Yeah.
No, I think that's awesome. Like, honestly, good for you. I literally just said doing the same exact thing, right? Except having no shame and sending him like a negative review. But I still want to be friends with him, please. Like, notice me. So yeah, we're just assholes, Ken. Listen to Jeremy. Jeremy, what should we know about what happens in the rest of the book?
Oh my god, so much, you guys. It's like you dip your toes in the water, and I haven't seen the rest of like this. I can't think of another Asian adjacent metaphor.
The best way to do it is to like maybe, and this is a very weird way to do a book review, but those gripes that we've had, you'll basically like feel like they're all subverted, except for Timu, who they just completely shit on.
Okay, I mean, sorry, I've just got to front load this because it's just been bothering me the entire time. Timu goes through a very, very rough time in this book. Like, if you think he's been doing it tough so far, it gets so much worse. Basically, what happens in this story is there's a bunch of, I guess you could call them colonizers, or the culture from across the Wall of Storms, which is where the book gets its title, invades Dara. And then a lot of the things that you dislike about the world, about the philosophy, about all these like these stupid philosophies that are very like narrow-minded, right, get challenged. Timu gets kidnapped by, for lack of a better phrase, the warrior princess of that new culture, and he gets raped to produce children to legitimize the foreign.
Oh, dude, that's so much more interesting than anything that's happened so far.
So,
the foreign invaders are like the Mongols?
That's the thing. So I think some people criticize it for being too similar to the Mongols. I think they're described as having like blonde hair, or like
No, that's not. If they ride horses, then that's Mongol.
They don't ride horses. They don't ride horses, but they ride a creature called Garina. Another fake man thing.
Oh god, I hate.
Does it have 5 legs?
I don't know how many legs they have, but they are basically dragons. So basically, right, they're this like this culture that seems to be like, I don't want to really pin it down too much. No, but like they come from like a desert sort of culture. So this is what I mean. It doesn't take easy choices.
There's a lot of mishmash.
There's a lot of mishmash.
It's a legitimate mishmash. Okay, it's cool.
Yeah. And so like if you started to be critical of like, you could, I don't want to say, because I know what happens further on in the book and we get more context of those cultures, that this is like a white culture that's like invading and colonization is bad, which is just an easy narrative. And we've seen it so many times before, right?
That I agree with. I respect, yeah.
Yeah. So this book, this colonizing culture comes over, and Timu just gets a really, really rough time, Derek. So he's just...
I knew it. I could sense it.
And do you think do you think him getting a lot of bad things is a result of him being so by the book and so obedient?
I mean, it kind of feels that way, right? Timu's character flaws are like really bad, right? And very frustrating to start with, but they don't justify what happens later on the novel.
They're not even flaws. He's just a guy with a certain personality, and he gets absolutely railed by the world for it. Like, and I already thought he was getting railed before by his own family who all pity him. And I was like, maybe he'll get his, like, you know, his, and he gets worse.
Yeah, it gets so much worse. Yeah.
Ken Liu is basically, it sounds like Ken Liu's basically like, don't be this guy, dude.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's Timu's story. In terms of the larger format of the novel, so basically what follows is a lot of like palace intrigue, infighting.
The concubine infighting is like a bit lame.
So that's where I really like, because I'd read the first book and I was like really like toing and froing, like I don't know if I can finish this, and then I got to this one, and that palace intrigue stuff was really agitating for me, and I was like, this is like one of those like Chinese soap operas that like my auntie or grandma like would watch in the background, and it's like banal stories. Yeah,
so it's like palace boredom,
and then like the world kind of turns upside down, because so that's all happening in the past. That's the kingdom of Dara. That's the drama there. The side story, you've got Mimi, the character that you spoke about earlier, and her teacher
Zomi or whatever. Like, don't they change her name partway through?
Yeah. So her name later becomes Zomi, and Luan goes on an adventure to try and see what's on the other side of this country, on the other side of this ocean, through what they call the wall of storms, which is just like this massive storms that people can't really navigate through. And it becomes quite like a colonizer, settler sort of story of a person coming to another culture and seeing what it's like, how, you know, it's not an easy narrative of like the settler coming in. You think, who's the colonizer here is a question you'd have. And they come over and they invade, and all sorts of terror happens. And
Wait, I don't understand. So Luan is from Dara, right? Meanwhile, Dara is being invaded. He goes out to be a settler in another land, the different land to the one that's invaded.
I think he goes to the invaders' land, right?
He goes to the invaders' land, and then the invaders use his knowledge unwittingly to invade Dara. So Luan's story and Mimi's story is told by, I guess, flashbacks, or they're just told earlier before the main narrative drive of the story, which is the fact that this country that you know, and there's things that agitate you about it, and there's a military order and a bureaucracy that doesn't work, and there's a kingdom, and like there's so many structures in there that you could like write for storytelling and write for criticism, right? Get turned upside down.
Wait, so with the invaders and Dara, who has the economic power here?
Dara has the economic power, but the other culture, I don't know how to say the term, but I think it's the Lyuku, have like military power, or like adjacent to a very significant fighting force through basically having dragons. Like they have dragons in the same way that Game of Thrones treats dragons as like nuclear weapons. It's like that.
The teacher character, his whole deal is that like, I'm just out here, I'm wandering, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to see stuff. Usually that character is allowed to be free. Like they're allowed to move throughout the world without consequence, right?
Yeah.
In this one, like you were saying before, effectively, his knowledge is used to decimate his homeland.
Yeah. Yeah.
The cost of not caring is the things that you don't care about will not be protected. Oops.
Are we still talking about that book, Derek?
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the book. I don't know what you're talking about. The only wall of storms I crossed was, I don't know, TSA?
The Pacific Ocean to get to Washington, D.C.
Pacific, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to know if the whole like patriarchy teacher thing gets subverted. Like,
yeah. Look, honestly, with that comment, I just never thought of the teacher patriarchy in that, like patriarchy in that way, and that actually, like hearing that from you, kind of opened my perspective on that a lot. So I guess in short, no, it's the character carves out their own journey. They follow their own path, separate from the teacher, and they learn their own lessons make their own mistakes based on their teacher's teachings. But in terms of like challenging that fundamental dynamic, I didn't see it. That's just made me think about it in a whole new light.
I actually think that would run antithetical to a fantasy story, though, because I feel like a fantasy world, it has to fundamentally hold your hand a little bit, because otherwise it's not escapism. You have to at least be lured into it.
That's fine. Like with Harry Potter, I love Dumbledore and McGonagall, like people that teach Harry things. It's just they do it in a less annoying, less I'm your daddy way.
Yeah.
There is a way to...
There's an emphasis on formal training, even if it's not formal, like literally through education, that you can clearly see that he does seem to really love instruction.
Yeah, instruction.
Yeah.
It's a very undemocratic way of learning.
That's a really great way to put it, because I felt that like so strongly and I couldn't figure out what it was.
Yeah. It's a reason why like didacticism sounds so close to like dictatorship, right? Like it's just it's a power thing, really.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I was reading it and I was thinking, oh wow, like these two people, like there's so much kinship between them. There's like this curiosity about learning about the world and enjoying all that. And the way you've put it, like I think about it so differently now. So that's really interesting.
But that's also I think it really comes from your relationship to authority. I don't know how much of that is actually in the story and how much of it is us being like particular types of people.
I don't know if you guys have this in your own Asian families, but like when I read like kind of instructive teaching, all I can think about is that one annoying uncle that's like puts his hand behind his back and be like, do this. And I'm just supposed to be like, thanks for the advice. Wow. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. That would be my...
It didn't like I have a few of those too in mind, but I didn't think about that when I saw this relationship or some of the other relationships I saw.
Okay, now let's go to the money section. I feel like this is the most sellout section. I've received feedback from a very real life listener who is a real person who told me that what we did was reacting to 1-star reviews was like the best thing he had ever heard on any podcast. So I'm like, I'm going to go in hard on that.
I don't know. The real part. Okay, sorry. You just said real so many times. I'm just convinced otherwise now.
I reiterated he's real because one time Derek made a comment on LP about him being a fake person. This is deep LP lore now. No, so today we're going to do reacting to 1-star reviews and 5-star reviews of The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. Okay, so this first one is a 5-star review that goes, fan-freaking-tastic. I look forward to the next book in 2019. God, I hate even thinking about next year because the only thing that pops in my head is, what if the cancer comes back? It makes me afraid to look forward to books.
Oh my god. Sorry, I hadn't read that before, and as you said it, I was like, that came out of nowhere. What?
That was brilliant writing, by the way.
I know.
Wow.
That really got me.
That was really good.
Props to this reviewer. I hope you are cancer-free, and I hope you are happy and healthy and reading many books.
Sorry, Dark. Look forward to the next book in 2019. Does he have a review for the subsequent years? I mean...
I'll check. The name is Melissa. Oh, yes! Melissa! I assume it's she, her. Her most recent post is this year. Yay, yes, Melissa, okay. I'm so glad you're okay. Thank you for writing this 5-star review. And I hope you got to read the rest of this series.
You know what I hope? I hope that she read the rest of the series and was like, I don't like it at all.
What a great 5-star review to open. All right, let's bring on the next review.
Yeah, I can't believe that was our reaction to it. It had nothing to do with this.
We just wanted to know if Melissa was okay, and now that we know that she's okay, or that they're okay, it's great.
Yeah,
that's what matters. I think Jeremy should read the next one.
I think so too. So this is the next review is for 1 star. Abusively stupid. Full stop. I mean, it hurt to say out loud, honestly.
Oh,
What was the name of the user?
why do you care about that? Like,
Because it might be one of my burner accounts. I don't know.
bruh.
I have a few, and
I also think this review is very mean. And also, like, what do they mean? Abusively stupid.
like he's smart. He's clearly smarter than you. Like he's got like more than one degree. He's a professional. He could have been a lawyer if he wanted to be. I think he was a lawyer, right, for a while.
The only person qualified to call Ken Liu stupid in any way. But also, like, not just stupid, abusively stupid. Like, what does that mean?
Even though I'm growing to like the book, when he starts hitting you with those metaphors,
Derek, your whole time is just talking about how much you hate it and how much you're starting to like it and how much you're going to finish the rest of it. I think that says a lot about who you are as a person and as a reader. So I'm sure Chad is really enjoying that. That said, I think you should read the next review, which is a 5-star review.
All right, okay, 5 stars. Take it all, Lou. Take all your well-deserved stars, and thank you for still haunting me with your words. Many star emojis. I can count on one hand the number of books that have rendered me speechless. The Magnificent Wall of Storms is one of them. And since I can't paint magic in my words, here's my shortest review yet. All caps, simply perfection. Hauntingly beautiful. Thank you, and goodbye.
Sorry, was that written like after the cancer came back? Sorry, the goodbye just sounded really ominous.
Yeah. Perfection, thank you, and goodbye.
That was a really good review, actually.
You know, I'm not going to torture Jeremy by making him read the next 1-star review. We should read the next 5-star review. I think we should give him a 5-star review to read.
Okay, so this one reads, somewhere between George R. Martin's Game of Thrones and Shi Nai An's Water Margin, the Dandelion series from Ken Liu is an amazing read. There are several elements of this book which I found striking and original. One, the strong female leads, with the possible exception of Game of Thrones. The fantasy series that I have read have offered a variety of strong, intelligent female leads and even female-female love without succumbing to pandering or pornography. Number 2, the geek factor. He loves creating problems and using engineering to solve them. 3, the schools of philosophy. And 4, the political allegory. So all the reasons that you guys hate.
Cool.
Jeremy, what's your take on the strong female thing? Like, I'm just so curious.
Yeah, so I think it was just funny because we were discussing earlier about Timu and Fyro, the two sons. The story is really about, at least from my read of it, the story of Mimi who becomes Zomi and Thera, and that this is their book really, and that's the reference to female love in this review. It's their love story, their relationship, and their experience going through this.
Who's
basically this
Thera or Thera? Is she the daughter?
The daughter, yeah. I think the oldest.
sister.
So they were just the center of the story. They were the heroes and the engineers. They were the ones who made like the decisive decisions. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the best qualified person to speak about what good female representation looks like, but I just thought I just hadn't seen this dimension to female characters in terms of like having such an anchoring role in a fantasy story. So I thought it was really great. I never got the icky feeling that I get sometimes where I feel like I'm meant to like love this female character. We're meant to fall in love with them. We're meant to like put them on a pedestal or anything like that. I didn't feel that. So in my books, that was a good female representation, and there should be more, but I don't know. I'm not the most qualified.
Okay.
Should I read the next one? We get into character for this one. It's a bit.
It's a 1-star, right?
Yeah, it's a 1-star review. Well, the first half of this book is actually really good, and then the invasion happens and everything goes downhill. And it's only after this point that you look back and see this book portrays all men as either stupid or evil, and women as the saviors. Plus, there's really only one character to truly connect with. Why so many booktubers hail this as a masterpiece is a mystery to me. DNF at 75%. Grace of Kings is pretty darn good. This, overlong, poorly written, poorly edited and basically goes nowhere. And I feel like that's fundamentally he's just some guy who's like, I don't like that there are female leads. Dude, shut up. There was no other comment. He just didn't like that they were women.
I feel like that's a 1-star review that's actually like a 5-star review that the author would have taken as a 5-star review.
Yeah.
He liked Grace of Kings, which is like probably, I assume, less subversive. He basically is like, I'm a traditionalist and I want, like, I don't like that this is different. I mean,
honestly, assuming that this is a like a real review. I mean, I generally don't know, because how do you read like good on you for finishing, like getting 75% of the book. Maybe I'm definitely over rewarding here, but like 75% of the book through something that you fundamentally do not believe in.
That women should exist.
Exactly. Something so obvious, but yeah.
Okay.
You guys have spared me from reading all the bad ones, so I can finish the last.
Go for it.
Okay, 1-star review. Our last one. Absolutely one of the. Oh man, I can't say that. All right, it's fine. Okay, I'll just cringe through it. All right. Absolutely one of the worst fantasy novels I've ever read. I'm so sorry. Stupidly, I struggled through to the end, and I'm sorry I wasted so much time. No, you didn't. The book easily could have been 1/4 of its current length and would have been a better novel for that shortening. No! The main problem is that there is the main storyline that is okay, but just okay. No, it's great. And then this bizarre array of meaningless side stories that take the reader repeatedly back in time to tell long tales that really have nothing to do with the plot or main characters. Things have context. You didn't just fall out of the... Okay. You have to page through the dross to get to tiny kernels of the story.
Dross!
On top of this, the level of cruelty demonstrated by the villains is just obscene and unnecessary, throwing babies up in the air in front of their parents and laughing when they bounce. Then after wading through all this tripe, you get to the end and nothing happens. Most of the good guys are dead. The lovers are sundered. The bad guys are still around and remotely in charge. There is no satisfaction for anyone. Do yourself a favor and leave this on the shelf. Oof, man. So many feelings.
Well, by the way, so you don't think that it would have been better if it was more concise?
I don't think so. I mean, like, there are a lot of, like, I didn't answer a question ages ago about the ships and technology. There are a lot of, like, they're like diversions, right? Like, chapters about how these dragons work, how they breathe fire, stories about how the ships were built, what resources went into it, where from, etc. I found that added texture. I really liked it. But I actually do understand if somebody just doesn't want to read a story that has these side parts that sort of like just purely for exposition. And funnily enough, it kind of reminds me of like those pages that you have when you're watching, say, Attack on Titan, or like, I think even Ava. It has those pages that just sort of explain the detail of how this machine is, what model it is, etc. And it's kind of like that. And I love that stuff. I think that's awesome. I think it's cool because it's like texture, color, detail. But, you know, people don't. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's a geek thing, I think.
Yeah, it's just a geek thing.
Which was the same thing that was said, like, that was good about the review above.
But exactly.
That being said, the one part I hated maybe the most was, you know, when they start, he retells the Zodiac story for no reason.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, this is so pointless. I don't really understand what this is for. I can't imagine how it would set up I don't know if maybe it does set up something else.
I don't recall,
but
honestly. Yeah.
But it feels like it's just it's just doing an Asian thing. And sometimes he does that. He'll be like, this is a cool thing about Asia, and then like say it, but it actually isn't cool, one. Two, like, people are already familiar with the Zodiac story. Like, you're not telling anyone any new information. So like you doing your version of it, which doesn't add anything, seems kind of pointless. Other than to be like, this world is kind of like China, but like not really.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a super good example to use to illustrate like a literary point, which is, say when you tell your kid the Zodiac story, right? The reason your kid wants to listen is because they know they're a tiger, they're a dragon, they're a dog, and they're waiting for their own Zodiac to pop up in the story and be like, hey, I am a rat. How come I am the first in the Zodiac? Like, how do I become so, like, see, even in that little example, you see the kid already has inherent an inherent reason to care about the story even before the parent starts telling it. But
Yeah.
in the novel, you have to create that. You have to create that reason before you start telling the story, I think. I think maybe what you're complaining is that like he didn't really create a story, a reason for you to care. He's just banking on the fact that the reader will care.
I guess we should probably talk about more writery things.
Yeah.
Not just like whether we like the book or not. Because I was gonna say, at least in regards to like meaningless side stories, sometimes I like a meaningless side story, but it has to be told a very particular way. Because I get really annoyed with like pointless, like in The Witcher, you have a lot of pointless side stories, and because specifically it's almost always told around a campfire or when they're like having dinner or something, it feels like you're with your friends and then like you met a new guy and like on your journey and you're like, hey, like, do you ever have syphilis? That shit is wild. And then like someone's like, oh man, I remember like I was with this girl one time and like I don't know if it was like syphilis, she was like sick or something, and then like it was like dysentery. Then like that's like an entire plot point in. It doesn't mean anything to the story, but it's so fleshed out, and it's like it's how characters tell stories that have this innate meaning, and it advances the character. Whereas like those little stories about, they're just kind of like top-down views.
Yeah. Oh, I hate top-down views. Oh my god.
But that's to be fair, that's a fantasy thing.
Which
is weird because fantasy also has the opposite trope that also exists, which is the like storyteller characters telling stories. So like, I don't know, it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
You can't really blame the genre, right?
The whole top-down thing, it really reminds me of like a massive fantasy TV show approach. I feel like reading this book is like watching a massive, like modern high-budget fantasy TV show. Also a bit like a video game. Also a bit like a video game too, where you just see these like elaborate, finely dressed characters with no like, at least initially, you have to watch for very long to get into like the motivation and get to know them and stuff. I think what you were saying earlier, like when you want to do a random side story, you got to find a way to cleverly anchor it. Like what you said about like sitting around the campfire thing, that's a brilliant way to anchor it. Like it's a sidetrack, but there's like that point of departure instead of just putting you to that top-down view. This might be a good place to wrap up our discussion. If there's anything else that anyone would like to say?
Yeah, if you guys ever do finish this book, I would be very happy to talk to you guys about it some more.
Jeremy is just waiting for our apology.
No. I really love this book, and I love that you guys gave it a shot. And it's totally fine. It's not for you, but
so humble and gracious.
Brilliant.
I know. Like Jeremy is
it's a bit
so
Timu
amazing.
for me, but that's all right. You're about to get punished pretty mightily.
Oh my god, no.
Well, not that specific way. God damn.
So dark. Wow.
Well, like an invader is gonna invade Australia, and then their princess is gonna force marry Jeremy.
I feel like that was implied, but to hear it said out loud is just so much scarier. Yeah.
Okay. I guess one tiny mini little thing from me before I do the outro is that in the beginning of the book, when Mimi's mother is literally telling her like a mother to daughter bedtime story, she said this very specific thing. She's like, oh, Mimi, when your father was alive, we would do this. This is what we would do. We would tell each other stories. And this mother said to her very young daughter, it was like, so what your father and I did was every night in bed, after we had coupled, we would tell each other stories.
It's so gross and chaste. It made me like feel a little sick.
I'm like, wait, why would a mother say that to her daughter in any circumstance?
I don't think that's the weird thing about it, to be honest.
What?
I don't think that's that weird. I think that the word use. I don't think that's not my problem with it. You can go ahead with your criticism first. I don't know.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know. I think there's so many things, and fantasy is so easy and difficult because a lot of things that you just think that's weird. I wouldn't do that in my other relationships. But then like, okay, cool. Different culture is just an easy out for a lot of things.
No. But this is my thing is it's not about that. I don't have any gripe with the telling whatever. The use of that phrase and that sentence is really gross. Like, coupled is chased in a way that, you know,
That
those
is
like
gross.
those very young Christian couples talk,
Yeah,
and you're like,
yeah.
I mean, the relationship between fantasy and religion, Mormonism, Christianity is a whole thing.
Whole thing.
This is not the right book for that.
I think we could have talked. We could have a whole nother episode
probably
about
could
it.
have, yeah.
It would be so good.
Yeah.
And so offensive. That is it for this episode of Licensed Poetics. Thank you so much to Jeremy, our very special guest, for joining on this book club episode. I hope you had fun.
Absolutely. Great time, guys.
Yay. And we'll definitely have you on again in the future if you'd like to come back.
Yeah, and
sure.
and I think we'll be probably doing the next book in the series, which is what, Jeremy?
The Veiled Throne and The Speaking Bones, because you have to read them back to back. And they're about 1,000 pages odd. You know, plenty of time.
1,000 pages. Wow. Oh my God.
Abusively stupid.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Fan Ling.
I'm Derek Dow.
And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.